Hang on. Sister just sent me a new laptop. And yeah, I need to go through it. Oh, come on. There we go. I don't know. What do you want to watch? Oh, I'm not watching a 2-hour video right now. Nope. You know what? What I wanted to look at was... You know, they're in Congress talking about making some massive reforms, apparently, to Social Security. And no one is paying attention. So, I guess we'll see. Right now, they're predicting, as is, there'll be like a 30% drop in like 10 years because it's becoming insolvent, which essentially means there just won't be any money left saved in the account, and they'll have to... It'll just be a direct transfer from your paycheck directly to the people who are getting it, as opposed to them being able to save money over time. But it's always kind of... Social Security is wacky because here's the issue. Here's the problem with Social Security. So there's two different types of taxes: payroll taxes and income taxes. So when you pay for Social Security to do payroll taxes, that money first goes to the people who need it, and then they'll put some money away, or they'll save money. But the government only buys government bonds. So the U.S. government only buys federal bonds with that money. And then in return, your income taxes are paying off those bonds. So it's this weird government Ponzi scheme where your income taxes is paying the interest for the people who bought social, or excuse me, who are using Social Security now or in the past, and so you end up with this double tax. You end up getting hit twice in taxes. It'd make a lot more sense if you had, hey, here is Social Security, here is your money. Your money goes into an account. The government guarantees that portion, pays you off. If you have any money left over, it just gets dispersed throughout the system. But I mean, heaven forbid we actually do something intelligent. No. You want to bite on one of these get rich quick schemes? It's probably just kind of a boring night. I've been working since like 6:30 this morning, so I have like no motivation. Was sitting in classes all day and spent the last 3 hours or 4 hours actually just doing paperwork and reamping a couple of the software systems, but it's just going to be a long week, no matter which way I dice it.
What will your trading account look like 8 weeks from now? Would you believe me if I told you that you'll finally be consistently...
The early stages of hard work and focus are going to feel like agitation, stress, and confusion because that's the norepinephrine and adrenaline system kicking in. None of us would expect to walk into the gym and do our PR lift or, a performer go do something without warming up. The brain also needs to warm up and start to hone in which circuits are going to be active. And it's unreasonable for us to think, oh, I've got an hour, I'm going to plop down and write beautifully for an hour, my best work. We need to accept that there's a period of agitation and stress that accompanies the dropping into these highly concentrated states. Now, in terms of the reward that accompanies the feeling that we're funneling into that groove of being productive in one regime, like for you writing this book, the dopamine system is really important to understand. So we've talked about norepinephrine kind of gets you going. Acetylcholine is the spotlight of attention. The dopamine system is Mother Nature's hardwired ancient system in all animals, including humans, to put us on the right path.
So a couple things for me in my morning routine. Morning routine's hilarious because I see two things. There's the people in the world who can get up, drink some coffee, and get right to work. I am not that person. But there are also people who, they want you to have this morning routine that's 4 hours long, where it's you wake up, you go to the gym, you ice bath, you drink whatever amount of coffee or caffeine, then you eat these very specific macros, and then you meditate, and then you journal, and then it's like, at what point do you just get to the day? Me personally, I get up, I go to the gym. If I can get on a rowing machine or jog for 15 to 20 minutes, it actually feels kind of weird because it's not, it expresses itself in a couple different ways where I either feel like almost like a drop in my body where everything kind of relaxes, or it's like I just walk out of the fog. It's another way to explain it. But once I feel that and then drink a little bit of caffeine, good to go. Like if I don't do that, I tend to have a lot of anxiety during the day and a lot of frustration. But if I can get that first 15 to 20 minutes of cardio in the morning, I'm really good. And then I go lift at night, like high rep, lower weight. I've been kind of on a cut lately. I've lost a bunch of weight, but I'm not into that hardcore lift a ton of weight now. I just do it because it makes me feel good.
A lot of people talk about dopamine as this thing that you get when you publish the book or when you get the book deal or when something wonderful happens, like your child's born. And that's true. But dopamine's main role is to be released anytime you achieve a milestone or you think you're on the right path. And when the dopamine system is tethered to a particular pattern of focus, remember duration, path, and outcome. So it's like, okay, you sit down, maybe you don't get much text out, but then the next day you get 800 words of really solid text and you feel good. You're like, I'm into this. What does that dopamine system do? The dopamine system takes the norepinephrine, which is normally rate limiting. Like at some point, there's so much norepinephrine that you quit. Dopamine can push that noradrenaline back down, that adrenaline back down, and give you more room, more space to do duration, path, and outcome work, highly focused work. And I'm making duration, path, outcome synonymous with highly focused work. Why would this happen? So let's think about an animal. Let's think about a deer that wakes up and is thirsty.
Actually, I didn't know that how much hormones have to play into this. I do know that your body physiologically will also rearrange itself. So, and this isn't just the brain. So for example, people will talk about like it just clicks or something happens. After you start performing a task over a period of time, your brain itself will start changing up its synapses in order to make a task easier. But also if you start performing any physical activity, for example, like if you start lifting, if you start running, if you start doing these things, the blood vessels will start rearranging themselves and the muscles will start to expand and pathways will start changing in order to make the task easier for your body. I'm pretty sure this is much easier for the body to do when you're younger. As you get older, it slows down, so it's harder to learn new things.
And it's wandering out looking for water. That animal needs water. It doesn't know that it needs water. It experiences agitation. The same way that a baby feels agitation when it wants food, but it doesn't know it needs food. It just feels agitation and cries, and the caretaker comes, hopefully. That deer is now foraging for something that it needs. And let's say it smells water, because deer can actually do that, and arrives at a stream and takes a sip of water. There's dopamine release then that puts it on a path to maybe a larger lake or something of that sort, or to be able to go achieve food. So when we are on the right path and we hit a milestone, dopamine is released and it tends to tighten our focus more for that activity. This is why drugs of abuse and why alcoholism and some process addictions, which are behavioral addictions, are so dangerous, because a lot of those drugs of abuse are dopamine. So it becomes this cyclical loop where there's no other behavior that can evoke the same level of release.
Right.
In fact, I sort of define addiction as a progressive narrowing of the things that bring you pleasure. And I say that because it really is the way that the dopamine system works. Normally, the dopamine system is designed to be generic. It's designed to get me to do lots of things, social interactions, work, exercise, all those things. Just like the stress system is designed to get me out of bed in the morning, a cortisol pulse is what gets me out of bed in the morning. It's also what led me to pursue a career in science out of fear initially, and eventually pleasure. So the dopamine system is tethered to those states of focus. And it's what Mother Nature designed so that the neuroplasticity would occur and you would want to continue those behaviors again in the future. That deer needs to know and remember and create a memory, not just of where that stream is, but the process of, when I feel that agitation, I'm gonna get up and go down this particular path.
Right.
And so people think of the dopamine system as this kind of like catch-all for reward. Oh, you get likes on Instagram and it makes you feel good. That's not really how it works. And the important thing to understand is when you start getting a convergence of norepinephrine, so that level of agitation, duration, path, outcome, acetylcholine, and dopamine, now you're starting to wire in the behaviors that make people really good at certain things. What this means is that for any of us, success in any endeavor is very closely related to how much focus we can bring to that endeavor. And so growth mindset is, I believe, if it's sort of a neuroscience lens on growth mindset, would be that the agitation and stress that you feel at the beginning of something and when you're trying to lean into it and you can't focus is just a recognized gate. You have to pass through that gate to get to the focus component. And then if you can reward the effort process, you really start to feel joy and low levels of excitement in the effort process. That's that buffering of adrenaline. That's that feeling like, yes, I've got a lot of adrenaline in my system, but I'm on the right path. It feels good to walk up this hill, so to speak. And when you start to bring those neural circuits together, you really start to create a whole set of circuits that are designed to be exported to any behavior you want.
So I think in more plain terms, what he's saying here is that when you start any new task, you are not going to feel motivated to do a task. But as you do that task and perform that task more and more often, it's going to be easier to get over that motivation hump. And then you're starting to feel good and more excited about doing things. So, like for me, for example, right now my struggle is with flashcards, and there's some stuff I've been working on, just memorizing lines and whatnot. Or when you first go to the gym or getting back in school, that's why I feel that it's really summer school. I feel like summer school or these long breaks from school are really, really bad for people, because you're constantly shifting in and out of the state of I'm doing something, I'm not doing something, I'm doing something, I'm not doing something. And so, which is why I also prefer to work 6 or 7 days a week, because if I stop like Saturday or Sunday, or I stop take like a 3-day weekend, Monday morning is just, it just sucks, because you're trying to jump back into something, and the longer you push that out, the worse it gets.
So if it's writing a book, great. If it's podcasting, great. If it's building a business, great. If it's building a terrific relationship, great. Then the circuits that Mother Nature has designed are incredibly generic, so that we could adapt to whatever it is that we need to do. And I think the misunderstanding around how these circuits work has led to this idea that there's some secret entry point, maybe marked flow on the door, and there's a trampoline up to that door, and you just open that door and you're going to be in it.
Right.
And nothing could be further from the truth. And anyone who's done well in any career or athletic pursuit knows this. But unfortunately, there's a kind of obsession with the idea that it's all supposed to feel good. And it does feel good, but there's a whole staircase in which it feels kind of lousy. The idea that you can self-reward the effort process is extremely powerful. Because what it means is that if you can recognize agitation, stress, and confusion as an entry point to where you eventually want to go, I do think that even just mental recognition can allow people to pass through it more easily. They think they're doing something wrong. And then rewarding yourself when you achieve any milestone, like running to a particular location if you're trying to run a long distance, and then registering that as a partial win. What we know is that the dopamine that's released in response to that suppresses the total amount of adrenaline and gives you more room, more time, more energy to run in the running example. And this is anchored in a real scientific result. So last year there was a paper published that essentially was asking why any human or animal quits at any behavior. We're talking about running, or we're talking about long bouts of work. The question is, why do we quit? Like, what is that? And it turns out that every time we exert effort, a certain amount of noradrenaline in the brain is released. And there's a sort of a counter in the brainstem. And at some point, enough noradrenaline is released and it shuts down cognitive control, deliberate control over the motor circuitry, and we quit. The thing that can restore those levels, or it can sort of reset those levels lower and give us more gas, more mileage, is dopamine. And it makes perfect sense, because our species had to move against very challenging things in nature and in culture at every stage of our evolution, including now. A good example would be if you're really slogging it out and things are miserable. Just think like the worst family vacation, everything's a disaster, or a very hard physical event, and someone cracks a joke. You almost immediately feel a sense of relief. You see this in the team that wins the Super Bowl. Both teams slogged it out. You have to believe they were both at max effort the entire game. Look at the team that wins. They have extra energy. They're jumping all over the place. So it can't be physical energy. It can't be glycogen related. It's not ketone related. It's nothing in the body in that sense. It's dopamine's ability to take that level of norepinephrine and smack it back down. And so we can learn this, right? I mean, I think this is where there's real power. Like in your story, the story that I'm familiar with from your book, like the ability to push through those pain points is something that we really can export to other aspects of life, because it's the same neurochemicals that are involved. So when you get to a particular location, or maybe I recall, a portion where you're feeling lousy, you're injured, or you feel like you're hurt, and you can reframe it mentally and think, I'm actually still on the ladder. I'm still holding onto a rung. I know at least that much. I'm still breathing. I know that much. And the lift that we get is not some psychological pump up. It's a neurochemical thing. It's dopamine suppressing norepinephrine and saying, you're on the right path. You can keep going. It's a permission to keep going. And we grant that permission to ourselves. No one grants that permission to us. I think one of the other kind of misconceptions that we want to dissolve is this idea that external rewards can actually propel us down long paths of success and high performance. They can't. A friend from the SEAL teams, and somebody asked us recently, we were giving a talk, and somebody said, how can I make sure that I continue to self-reward and I'm not driven by these external rewards? How can I continue to have that drive? And his answer was very good. He said, give away all the external rewards. There's a famous Stanford study done at Bing Nursery School. They did a study where they looked at kids that liked to playing during their recess, but it's all recess in nursery school, but they're drawing, and they took the kids that really like to draw, and they started giving them little gold stars on their drawings. And then they like the gold stars for a kid, that's an extrinsic reward. And then they stopped doing that, and the kids stopped drawing. They associate the good feeling of doing it with the external rewards. We have to be very cautious about how much of our internal dopamine we attach to external rewards if we want to continue to grow and pursue and focus and work hard. If you just want to get to some place and cash in, then fine. But most people find themselves in a pretty miserable place because their dopamine was so attached to external rewards, they need more and more. One of the most powerful things that any person can do is to learn to control this idea of duration, path, and outcome, and attach an internal sense of reward, just that you're doing well, to reward yourself mentally, just say, I'm doing well, I'm actually on the right path. To do that inside of the demands that come from the external world. The more often that we can self-reward some aspect of the process, provided it's in the right direction of what we're trying to achieve, the more energy we're going to have for that, the more focus we're going to have for that. And remember, the reason I say energy is that limiting amount of noradrenaline is constantly being kept at bay. You're literally buffering the quit response. And so when people start realizing that
according to NASA, neural pathways will rewire in 4 weeks. When you are consistent and follow through on a new routine task practice for 30 days, a 2009 research paper by the University College London suggests that it takes on average about 66 days of repetition to form a habit, which could indicate a change in the neural pathway. However, it usually takes several months to over a year for your brain to rewire. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural pathways throughout life and in response to experiences. So 66 days is the key number there. Oh.
At Caravel Autism Health, better outcomes mean improved skill development.
And all of a sudden, when I went through this divorce,
Okay, so The Secret, there's this book called The Secret. And actually, I think it's really funny because we were just with Andrew Huberman. This is literally the exact opposite of real science. Essentially what The Secret book was written to say was that, oh, if I just really believe in something and think really, really hard about it, then, you know, the universe will grant me this thing. The issue is there. The issue is there is that this is an absolute success bias. Because for every person that you hear about, oh, I thought about this thing really, really hard and went after and got it, ignores the majority of people who thought about something and failed. If you're successful, you genuinely are fairly obsessive about doing a repetitious activity over and over and over again. So it's no wonder you're constantly thinking about and wanting the success because you're constantly doing the activity. So this should be fun.
and I really bottomed out. You know, it was a tough one. And then my wife split with a younger man. It was a little rough on me. And then I started searching. And I watched that movie, The Secret. You know?
Oh, wow.
And all of a sudden, I kind of like watched it and bought into it. And I had a Mercedes at the time, and I had my buddy who had a car stereo shop deprogram the navigation, and I put The Secret in there. So every time you started the car, The Secret would come on the navigation screen.
Really?
Yeah, so I probably saw it and heard it 10,000 times, okay? And then I saw what the law of attraction was.
Okay, so Rogan has talked about this before, thinks, and I'm with him on this one, this is total nonsense. And understand, like, Hulk Hogan here, he's already driving a really nice car, so he already had some level of success. So it's like, well, wait a second, why would you... It's not like you're broke in some gutter somewhere. You're already successful at this point.
It was a natural law that not only does science say it works, and the Bible says it works. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer. We're talking about relationships. We're talking about money. We're talking about health. We're talking about everything. You know, you attract what you think. Everything comes from the heart. Your tongue speaks what the mind's thinking. So at the end of the day, I saw that law of attraction is actually a scientific law that we're given, such as aerodynamics. You know, how a plane will stay in the air with the wind going over the top of the wing faster than underneath. Buoyancy. You know, how buoyancy works. And then gravity. It's working right now. You're probably not even thinking of it.
I'm not thinking about it.
Okay, I know you're not. But gravity works too. And also the law of attraction works too. The rich get richer, poor get poorer. Like attracts like. You know, and so at the end of the day, after seeing The Secret thing and having it beat in my head, I went, this guy named James Ray, who went to prison for that sweat lodge thing.
Sweat lodge thing?
Yeah, he had a sweat lodge thing.
Oh, yeah, people died, right?
Yeah, James Ray. He at the time said something that really hit me hard on The Secret. He goes, there's probably things in your life that you're not proud of, and there's probably a lot of things in your life that you are proud of. But when would now, and he said the word, when would now be the time to change? And I went, I mean, you can change your direction of life by changing your thinking? And I went, you gotta be kidding me. So anyway, I started praying. I want to meet James Ray. And you think like it's already done. It's like when you pray,
right.
You don't pray like, oh, please, heal my back, I'm hurt. No, you say, thank you, God, for my perfect health, for my healing. You pray like it's already done. You know?
Oh, that's what you do?
Yes, that's what you do. You pray like it's already done. And so you guys are killing me. You want me to shut up?
No, I love you. Okay. We're talking about
killing it.
So anyway,
I want to hear more about
now
The
I'm
Secret.
praying to meet James Ray, right?
Right.
Praying. All of a sudden, I get a phone call. Hey, Dad, What's up, Nick? Oh, I'm in the bathroom here at this Beverly Hills Hotel. I think that guy's in here that's in that movie, The Secret. I said, ask him what his name is. And Nick goes, hey, excuse me, sir, what's your name? My name's James Ray. I put him on the phone. So now the guy I've been praying to meet, he's in the bathroom with my son. Okay, coincidence, whatever. There are no coincidences in life, but whatever. So anyway, now the long guy with the dreads, Michael Beckwith. Now I start praying, because I want to see him. I want to meet him now. So I'm figuring this works. So all of a sudden I had a really, really bad day one day, and I walked off the set of American Gladiators. I just walked off. And I had the #1 show on NBC, 8 o'clock. Ben Silverman I had an office in Beverly Hills. I had one in New York. Ben Silverman goes, you own the network. The numbers were crazy. We were doing really, really good. And I had a really bad situation happen. I just walked off the set. And I didn't come back. And I was in Tampa, and Layla Ali called me. She goes, what's up with you? I kind of told her what kind of was going on. She goes, I want you to come to church with me. And nobody's ever asked me to do that, right? So I said, when do you want me to come? She goes, how about this Sunday? I said, I'll be there. I was in Tampa. So I flew out there to go to church. Guess who's preaching? Michael Beckwith. So I'm like, the guy I wanted to meet, the guy with the dreads.
Okay. Oh my God. Hulk Hogan, although he's kind of like past his time here, was extremely popular in his time during American Gladiators, during WWE. Like he was the great wrestler, right? The great superstar, whatever. So it shouldn't be a surprise that other successful people are running around your sphere of influence, okay? I'm not going to run into Elon Musk because I'm not another billionaire, but guaranteed, guys like Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, I don't know, maybe George Soros 10 years ago or whatever, okay? These people are going to run around and eventually run into each other because of the circles they hang out in. So anyway,
I started listening to what he said. He ended up marrying me the second time, and we became friends and stuff. But it kind of led me down that path, to start searching and finding what worked for me and what I believed in. And ever since then, man, that's been the #1 priority. And it kind of locked me in, to my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and what I believe in. And so everything else is a distant second to what happens around me.
Yeah, that provides you with a lot of peace, right?
Oh my God,
that's the thing that all my friends that are very religious say. That it gives them a peace.
Yeah,
that I don't think people have without it, which is interesting.
Yeah, and the craziest thing was, Sky, the girl I'm engaged to, it's such a crazy story. I swore I'd never date another blonde. I swore to God I'd never date another blonde, right?
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So the really cool thing was, after I met her, there's a whole long story to that situation, but after I met her, the fact that she's a believer too is just really kind of makes things so easy.
It would be probably difficult for you at this stage of your life to date someone who wasn't, right?
Yeah, well, I was married to somebody the second time who wasn't. It didn't really resonate with her. That it was more the universe and the Wayne Dyer and all that stuff, Esther Hicks and all that stuff.
Well, I mean, that's a little bit of the law of attraction too, right?
Yeah, it is. But
there's a lot of
there's a lot of idolatry there, bro, and worshiping false idols. So I'm not on that team.
I hear what you're saying. Yeah. I keep an open mind about whether or not the law of attraction is. There's probably something going on with our minds and the way it interacts with reality that's not measurable. And
okay, Joe Rogan does this so incredibly well as an interviewer. Instead of just hey, I think this is nonsense, attack, you see him letting and allowing and encouraging people to keep going down that train of thought to see where it arrives, because there's absolutely something to say with staying positive and keep working through things. Okay, that's absolutely real. Persistence is a real thing. Okay, obviously, if someone works 12 hours a day on one thing and does it over 10 years, they're going to get really good at that thing. Okay, that's just how life works. We put a lot of work and effort into something. And so I think that there's far too often that we try to prey off on either weird universal pseudo laws that can just go back to, hey, you put in a lot of work and effort in order to make something better. Like my last project, it's literally been rewriting something over and over and over and over again. And recently, actually it was yesterday afternoon, I pulled up my original script on it. Obviously now it's way better now that I've edited it well over 100 times. Man, that's so weird.
I think you could say, we know that people that have a positive outlook and positive thinking and they do the right things, they get further and better in life, right? So it's obvious that the direction that you put your thoughts and your time and your effort into, if you're doing it the right way, yield results. The problem with that I have with like a lot of these people that think that you can just think about things and then they happen. It's like everybody that's thought about things and happen has already done. They do a lot of shit. There's a lot of movement. It's not as simple as just like thinking about something. But it might be a real aspect of it, because I know a lot of talented people that have a negative perspective and shit never seems to go right for them, even though they're really talented. There's like something about the way they look at life and reality. They're kind of like hamstringing themselves.
Well, it's more than just thinking it, brother. You have to believe it and you have to feel it like
Right.
it's already done, and then you got a better shot at it.
When you said that it's like scientifically proven, how is the law of attraction scientifically proven?
Well, it's proven because like attracts like. Well, positive charges and negative charges are opposites. But they repel away from each other. If you try to put them together. Well, positive. I take that back. Positive doesn't. Yeah.
Science.
Okay.
This Hulk Hogan weed's good.
Yeah.
It's science.
Yeah, you're
Everyone
right.
knows it.
Yeah.
We're not here
Yeah.
for science.
Okay.
This Hulk Hogan weed's good.
Yeah.
It's a little too good. It's a little problematic. I'm gonna tell you, there's sometimes I was lost.
One good way that you
That's kind of funny. It's always wild to me. Oh, who did I hear it from the other day? I saw this thing the other day, and it was really, really funny, because what it was essentially, it's like, okay, you want to chase some big goal. So it was something along the lines of, you learn the skills, you put in a ton of work, and then you're able to hire other people and automate out the tasks, and then you forget about the skills you learned, and then you forget about the work, and now you're just like left with all these nonsensical routines. I need to go find it again. It's actually a really good quote. But this drives me crazy. This really, really drives me crazy, especially from people who are already successful. Because like I said, Hogan was already successful. I mean, yeah, this was the time that he's been moving into American Gladiator, so he's already a TV star. What's always crazy is that you'll see people and hear from people who are already super successful, and they talk about what they're doing now, but then they'll go to an audience who's trying to learn how to do something, and they'll talk to those people as if what you're doing at the beginning of your career or the beginning stages of learning a task is the same as if you're learning at the end of a task. And so I have had this issue over and over and over again in my life, in that, and when you have mentors, people did not mentor me very well, but when you have people who are trying to coach you, or like you're trying to get into a career, oftentimes people who've been in a career for 20 or 30 years will forget about the things that they were doing on day one in order to get successful. And they're telling you the things that you needed to be doing 10, 20, 30 years into the career, and not what you need to be doing on day one. So I'd really encourage, like, if you're working with someone, ask them and talk to that person about what you needed to be doing on day one as opposed to day 10,000. Now, I think there's some things that are very different. So, for example, like YouTube, or a lot of skill sets. Like if you're going to relearn how to build a car or something like that, you just need to learn, the highest level. Like start at the beginning and then end at the end. Like learn the easy things first and then work your way through it. But at the end of the day, you have to have the quality there, as opposed to a lot of things like building a business. Okay, you're going to do things very differently on your first day than you are on your last day. It's just kind of how that works. Elon Musk? I don't know. I hate videos like this. Getting rich is actually really easy. Yeah, it's really easy when you rip people off. Yeah. You know what's wild to me when I start going through these videos, and you see so much of this, okay? Okay. So Hulk Hogan, law of attraction, just nonsensical. So just think it, right? I mean, that's a small aspect, but you're not talking about the full thing, okay? Andrew Huberman, absolute neuroscientist. Okay, his stuff is really, really good. It's very science based. He has like a PhD and he works for a university. Like his stuff is very real. But then I start pulling down into more stuff like, okay, when I look at stuff like this is obviously nonsense. Okay, you're not going to become a multimillionaire without trying. Okay, there's number one scientifically proven way to create wealth, and I think Ty Lopez is. I've listened to his stuff before. And it just seems, and I'm not the only one who says this. Like, it seems like there's just certain people who not necessarily, it's not necessarily illegal, but it's like really scammy how they've like worked around things and worked with people, and so they don't. They're good enough to like manipulate people to give them their money for through whatever means or whatever, but it feels like there's almost this like narrow gap between someone who is just able to speak in nonsensical terms and people who actually have the knowledge to explain something out to be successful. I mean, my coach that I'm working with right now, she is awesome. So shout out to Sales Gravy. But, instead of sitting there being like, oh, you just need to believe in yourself and just have a pot, like, no, it's like, okay, here are the tactical and strategic skill sets that you need to learn. Here's the frame on how we do things. Now, you're going to have to put the words in there yourself, but here's the frameworks, and here's what you're going to have to do in order to actually be successful, as opposed to like talking about having a positive attitude. Because at the end of the day, like, the only person who can decide to have a good attitude is you. The only person who can get up every day and work and decide to work is you. There's a lot of things that are internal that you just have to get over and figure out yourself, but there's other things that other people can teach you how to do. It's like if you're playing basketball, for example, a professional can teach you how to shoot the basketball, but at the same time, a professional is not going to be able to teach you to give it 100% when you're playing a game. That's internal. There's external forces. There's internal forces and external forces, and you've got to control both. See this, like, oh my God, that's ridiculous. Power of manifesting reality. Like, I already know it's nonsense. I got rich when I understood that. Like, okay, Tony Robbins, if you've ever taken his courses, it's all about this internalization. Like, great, but like if you're not going to bring it, you're just not going to bring it. Like, okay. I like my to-do list. I don't know. Nonsense like this. I work 1 hour, like I work 1 hour a week. Like, if you're brand new, like, yeah, at the end of your career, there's a lot of guys at the end of their career after working, whatever period of time really, really hard to make this happen, to automate and systematize things. But if you're brand new at something and you're just getting started out, you're not going to work 1 hour a week. I really do like Alex Hormozy's stuff. And a lot of his stuff is just very commonsensical, straightforward. I started his diet routine thing they talked about. Worked really well for me. So if you're looking to gain or lose weight, absolutely go look that up. But also a lot of his stuff is like, hey, you've got to learn this, work really, really hard to get good at it, and then you got to learn the next thing and get really good at it, and you got to stack it all on top of each other. Like, you have to get up every morning and go after it. Like it just has to get done. Let's see. He's like cross-eyed. What else we got? Not an Andrew Tate guy. Oh, now there's a club. There's a law of attraction club. That is, ugh. Ah, no thank you. You notice a lot of these too is like, that'd actually probably be a pretty good interview to listen to. I don't have time right now. You notice how a lot of these things are like, here, charisma.
Keanu
on
Reeves has become the
command.
internet's crush, whether he knows it or not.
And now you've been done.
Right. I mean, like, and it's not even. I mean, it's like not even. Are they even like? Hang on.
And Doug.
And Doug says you can customize and say.
It's not your fault that you care what other people think. It's a natural instinct almost everyone has, and it feels justified. Because if you truly don't care at all...
Yeah, see this.
By anyone my age. People at the age of 15 just can't comprehend having drive and wanting...
Ideal life. It's easy. Confident saying things they know some people won't like.
Okay, yeah, stuff like this drives me nuts. Like, I'm absolutely for React videos, like content videos or whatever, but what this really is you go through, and you're like going through this stuff. All it is just a whole bunch of like pop culture references that they voice over to basically just give you a whole bunch of nonsense, right? Here, let's pick one. Actually, it doesn't matter. Persuasion. Okay, so something like this.
Failure might delay your dreams, but fear will kill them, because fear leads to inaction. So in today's video, you'll learn 7 tricks to help silence that voice in your head that fears rejection. That way you can go to any conversation with confidence, knowing you'll feel completely unfazed.
See,
The
if you
reward
go
you think you'll
through...
get by doing it doesn't.
Okay.
Fastest ways to build extreme confidence. It's exposure therapy.
But his whole life.
There is power in speedrunning.
Okay, so like going through this stuff. Okay, so for example, it's like, you are not your first impression. Rejection is inevitable. Inevitable. Life is a numbers game. Amp up your carrot, sex, dismotivation. Rejection is good for you. See, rejection is a sign that you aren't a good man. Okay, stuff like this is really... These like tip videos, and I've been hanging out on LinkedIn a little bit more lately. LinkedIn is so full of videos like this and stuff like this. As opposed to, okay, if I'm scared of rejection, okay, as opposed to saying like, well, here's like 5 tips in case you get like, okay, truth of the matter is, something like fear of rejection, you just have to get over it. You have to do something a lot, and if you do it enough times, you get kind of immune to it. But then also there's a level of, hey, you're going to perform an activity or a task, and you're going to perform it through these steps. And what ends up happening is that because you're more focused on the task than the actual rejection, then you learn how to handle the rejection. So, but like I said, if someone walks up and is like, oh, you're not your first, like, what? Like, okay. Yeah, you know, I've had people who had really good first impressions. I've met people who have really bad rejection. Or are they doing this? Or is this?
That's something he didn't actually engage in about bodily autonomy. The most famous argument along these lines is the. So let's talk about the sort of tactics that you use when you're debating the abortion issue on places like the Whatever Podcast. How do you prepare for that sort of thing?
Well, when I'm...
Jordan Peterson, you've said that men need to avoid...
That's something he didn't actually engage in about bodily... They just kind of want abortion to be legal. And because they want that, they...
Okay, I'm not super worried about that. Oh, it's 7 o'clock and I need to go to the gym. I think I'll go at 8. Keep going for a little bit longer here. I don't think I've been on long enough. I usually trying to shoot for at least an hour a night to start with. I don't think I'm gonna... Don't know how to go all crazy with it. Is he interviewing Ray Dalio or just talking to Ray Dalio?
So we've gotten over our skis on debt. The Fed is going to try to print their way out of this. All that does is create inflation. They try to break the back of inflation with high interest rates, but so many people got themselves into debt in the good times on variable interest rates, or that they bought long on something like a bond where it devalues based on what happens with the interest rates. So as the interest rates go up, either people just can't make their interest rates payments, or the debt that they were holding goes down in value. Okay, so you've got this moment where a lot of people are about to lose money, and a lot of people are going to be very uneasy. And you've got the political divide that's continuing to escalate. We saw the last election cycle here in the US where people stormed the Capitol. It was a very sort of unnerving moment. And now it's like, well, things weren't nearly as bad then as they are coming into the 2024 election. So I start thinking, okay, what is the safe move? And if I'm honest, Ray, I start looking at, where do I live? So is there a move to be made within the US? Or I start thinking, do I become a more globally mobile citizen? Is there something that I should be thinking about there? I've got a lot of my money in cash. And then one thing that we didn't talk about, which we probably should, you mentioned the word hard money. And so hard money, I'll give my layperson's definition, and then if any of this is inaccurate, please let me know. But hard money being something that has intrinsic value. So gold, precious metals become something that I start thinking more seriously about. Now
Okay, be really careful when someone says hard money. Usually, when someone's talking about hard money, what they're talking about is private money. So, for example, if you want to fix and flip a house, you can go to the bank, which is like regular loan or whatever, or you want to rent the home, or you want to buy a rental, you can go to the bank, okay? Typically speaking, when we say hard money, what it is, there's an institution that they will reach out to private investors. The private investors will either give them money or promise them a certain amount of money, in which if another investor that wants to start a business or wants to purchase a piece of real estate, or wants to do something that has a higher level of risk that a normal bank doesn't want to loan on, you can go to this other institution that will allow you to use private money, also known as hard money, at a higher rate of interest than what the typical bank would give you. So what he's talking about is like a hard asset, which is like gold, silver, or other things that once upon a time was considered money. Okay, gold and silver historically are the oldest forms of currency in the world. Obviously, we don't use gold and silver in regular transactions, but in most places in the world, especially when you're doing like huge transactions, there's a lot of places that will still accept gold and silver as money.
What I'll call a digital native. So I think about Bitcoin is something on my radar. I know that you're maybe not a fan. But anyway, that's how I'm thinking about the world. I'm trying to be in cash. I'm not trying to be in anything long. I have, Ray Dalio, I have zero leverage. I don't play with leverage. Even when the money was free, I didn't take on any leverage, because that's the one thing that scares me. So safety is how I'm thinking about things. Now, I don't exactly know how to diversify well, but that becomes another part of how I look at this. And you've got the all-weather strategy that I know you've tried to articulate for people. So safety first, if I had to sum up my stance.
Everything you said is beautiful and very similar to the way I think, and I'll add a couple of things to it. But when we think about safety, we have to think about that as purchasing power, because a lot of people think if I put my money into a treasury bill, I get safety. Well, let's look at whether that's giving you a return that's compensating for inflation. So I just wanted to tweak what you said.
That's a very important tweak. And now you're getting into where I feel undereducated. So how do we then think through that?
Before I go there, I want to say, and also here's the other advice, and maybe we're all wrong. Maybe there's nothing to worry about. Okay, so how do I deal with that? Like what this guy Dalio is saying is very crazy, and who knows whether he's right or wrong, and he's been wrong in the past, and who knows if it's right, and simultaneously. So okay, that's exactly what you said is the way pretty much I look at it. What you said. And if I was to paint the world, I painted the world the way I did, okay? And I have those questions. And then beyond that, I say, you as an individual should think about the total safety, including maybe that terrible scenario doesn't happen, okay? That's what I'd like you to do. That's what I'd like you to do. And if you do that, you will come to a better balanced position. I want you to get balance, okay? I want you to do certain things. I want you to have enough savings, whatever, that, okay, to have security, to build the first level of, I think investing, which is the same as savings, comes in tiers.
Okay, understand that Ray Dalio's all-weather portfolio. The belief was essentially, because the belief is that you want, in a perfect world, you would get a guaranteed X amount of return every single year, no more, no less. Okay, a lot of people will chase higher returns, but with those higher returns, the dips are a lot harder. But if you get too low of a return, then it just gets eaten up by inflation. So just understand that Ray Dalio really built a career on trying to have a very, very consistent portfolio return year over year. And I think he was the largest hedge fund manager in the world, if I'm not mistaken. In either case, he was extraordinarily successful.
Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 on risk.
Staring at your screen isn't going to help you trade better or become full-time. There is a way to become consistently profitable with less than 1 hour of work.
And the first tier is, if everything goes wrong, I'm okay. And everything could be inflation, depression, anything, whatever it is. I lose my job. I whatever it is, I got that thing covered. Then the next level is, okay, what am I going to get the highest returns? What is my best bet? Okay, but start at that level. And then you said the other thing too, that it's not just the investment, it's where am I? Am I in the middle of a fight? Like, I don't want to be in the middle of a fight. Okay, what's it going to be like? So it does have geographic implications. I don't know, maybe it's the state or the state you go to, or the city you go to, or the country you go to, or whatever it is. And there are certain things you can do to say this one's going to be better than that one. Let me give you an example of that. There are three things you could do based on these three influences. Are you going to be in a place and around people and circumstances that are financially strong? In other words, the income better are they earning more than they're spending, and they have a good balance sheet? Because that means stability. If you can go through that, then you have stability. Places that are like that are better off. Number two, do they have internal conflict? Country, place, and is it a hospitable environment for me? Okay, that's the second. And then third, are they in the risk of an international war? I don't want to be where the fighting is. I really don't. And I want to be safe and stable and so on. So this is a time for looking for such things.
Yeah. Okay. While deeply unnerving, I think incredibly important to think through that. Let's talk about diversification, doing that well. You talk about uncorrelated assets, and I don't know how much you talk about this publicly, but I'd love to understand. It seemed like for people that don't know your background, you have a meteoric rise. You're in your 30s, on top of the world, unbelievable success. You make a huge bet on something, to your point earlier about have the humility to know that you may be wrong. You made a huge bet on a collapse, and it didn't play out. And it ended up that the market went up and you lost a lot of money, almost lose Bridgewater, managed to keep it together. You come up with a new strategy that I believe is known as pure alpha. It ends up getting tested multiple times in the market, and you guys crush when other people struggle, which leads you to be, for people that don't know, the largest hedge fund.
We made money in 28 of the last 32 years. We never had a really bad year. We made, I think it was during my time there, running at 11.8% a year, with the worst year being, I think it was down, I don't know, 10 or 12% sort of thing, and the next worst year being like down 1%, and we did that by simultaneously looking for opportunities and looking for good returning assets that were not correlated. Diversification of good, and just as you point out, what happened was, and by the way, those returns are not correlated with the stock market or whatever. So they were stock market, bond market, they're uncorrelated. So they were effective diversifiers in portfolios, which almost all go up and down together. And this was diversification. And so it was loved by investors, institutional investors, and so on. And the thing, and as you point out, what I learned from, basically this punch in the face mistake, this painful mistake, is I learned how to make good money without having big losses. I learned how to improve my return relative to my risk. And I learned that the holy grail of investing is 10 or 15 good uncorrelated return streams. Like, you get that and you will, I don't know, have a similar path to the path I've been fortunate enough to have. And so that's what I want to pass along to people. You go into the COVID year, the one year that we lost I don't know, it's 10 to 13% or something, was 2022 because COVID came along. I didn't have COVID in our system. We had other things, so that was it. And so there's, something comes along all the time for anything. Everything has its time. And so you put your money in any one thing. You could think, oh, okay, movie theaters are good, and then you get COVID, or cruise lines are good, and then you get COVID, and or whatever it is good. Well, it's good sometimes, but there's always something that always is going to mess up the one thing. So you don't want, like, in my opinion, you don't want more than 10% of your money in anything, and you want, probably you don't want more than 7.5% of your money in anything, and they want to be good different things, and that's the message I'm trying to convey.
Right now, one of the things that has me the most unnerved is the attack on the dollar. So you've got the BRICS nations, for people that haven't heard that acronym before, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa are getting together. And I know this has been going on for quite some time, so I don't know if I should be overly paranoid about that in this moment or not. But again, going back to those indicators that point to a transition from phase 5 to phase 6, do you think there's anything that we can prepare for as we look at the big cycle, as we see this particular moment with the assault on the dollar? Is there anything in the big cycle that can educate us on how to deal with this moment?
Just all happens over and over. The decline of the British pound as a reserve currency. Before that, the decline of the Dutch guilder as a reserve currency. All happened for the same reasons, which is, two things are going on. First of all, they're holding all of this dollars, and the stuff that we talked about is going on. And then also there's the weaponization through sanctions of the dollar. In other words, the United States' greatest weapon to use, as distinct from its military weapon, is sanctions. And so sanctions mean you freeze other assets, you freeze assets. Those assets are the bonds. And so that happened with Russia, and there are threats of it with other countries, China, and so on. And there's kind of the thinking, well, if I hold the bonds, can that happen to me? And then why am I transacting in this other third currency rather than transacting directly? So, for example, the United States share of world trade has declined, and China's share of world trade has increased to become greater. And so if two countries are trading, let's say Saudi Arabia is trading with China, why do they buy? Why do they go to the dollars in order to do that? No good reason to go to the dollars, and then they're worried about holding the dollars because they might get sanctioned. And so you see more of those transactions taking place in other currencies. And then the usefulness of the dollar as a storehold of wealth changes. It's like, think about it in, the most fundamental way. Everybody wants a medium of exchange and a storehold of wealth. So in other words, if everybody's using the dollar in world trade, then you want to save in dollars because you say, okay, now that's the thing I spend in, and I save in the dollars. But over time, as the share of world trade goes down, why aren't they denominating in like China has a larger share of world trade? Traditionally, the countries that have the world's reserve currency have the largest share of world trade and the largest share of world capital flows. And because the United States has declined, and also there's a worry about that, holding it because of sanctions. I mean, just imagine how the Chinese must feel about having a lot of money in treasury bonds. Like, I would be worried that I would be treated like Russia would be treated. That's not something I would want to hold as a safe asset. And other countries who might feel that they can get sanctioned, and for all those reasons, they're less inclined to hold. And when we call dollars, what we're really calling is dollar debt, because you hold dollar debt, and that's what is a debt? It's a promise to receive currency. So, okay, so now getting out of those things and transacting in other currencies seems to be the safer thing to do for those countries. And so that's the dynamic that's taking place. So it's not an attack on the dollar. It's like, I don't want to hold those things. And so very similar to on the British pound, what happened is the British had the war, and they were the most powerful empire ever in the world. And they had World War II, and they came out of World War II financially in debt, a lot of debt. And who held the debt? All these countries held the debt because that was the residual from them. But they had a problem. They had a debt problem. And so they needed to print more money because there was too much of a squeeze. And then so it deteriorated, and then they sort of said, please hold my debt, please hold my debt. They went to Commonwealth countries, part of those that were in the former British Empire. And then you had the Suez Canal incident where there's sort of a war, and everybody realizes, well, hey, wait a second. That British Empire ain't the British Empire, and they're heavily in debt. And then they say, I don't want to own that debt. And there went the British pound. So that's just how the mechanics work.
Okay, so looking at the U.S. and I don't want to be cheeky and say speaking directly to the U.S. government, but if I were to be so bold, so if this is that predictable moment where, okay, there are actions that we can take as a country that will either help us keep the world reserve currency status, and there are actions that we can take that will cause us to lose that status more quickly. It seems like, okay, you've got the BRICS nations. They are moving away from the dollar. It seems like that card has already been played. I don't know if you think there's anything that we can do to make that easier. But certainly, speaking to printing, so one thing that I've heard recently, and this is a really fascinating concept, that when you have other nations that are holding your currency, holding debt, as you said, they're not like hoarding cash, but they're holding a lot of debt. If we print money, what we're essentially doing is
okay, so obviously Ray Dalio is significantly more intelligent about me than this thing, but this is something I do not agree with him about. Is that at this current moment, I do not think that the U.S. I don't think there's any worry at this exact second that the world's going to stop using the U.S. dollar for the world currency. The reason why there was a swap from Great Britain being the world power is because that empire was in decline for several hundred years, right? I mean, we branched off. I mean, civil wars, I guess not even a civil war, but revolutionary wars erupted across the world, removing Britain as a power. So then, after World War II, they finally, I guess arguably you could say after World War One, but for certainly after World War II, they collapsed as a power because Germany bombed the rest of the world into oblivion, and then Russia and the United States bombed Germany into oblivion. So the reason why Great Britain lost its power was because the World War II transitioned all the literally all the world's manufacturing to primarily the United States and then partially Russia for whatever was left. And so if you look at the current moment, there is no other country in the world currently that can replace the US dollar. Now, if we got into World War III or some massive event happened, yes, that would be possible. I mean, even places like China is a good example because China grew up over the past 20 years significantly. You know, now they're the world's manufacturer, there's all these other things, but the issue with China is that China built its country on the back of stealing technology and intellectual property from everyone else. The issue is with that is that if you look at China on the world stage, China still does not lead in development and innovation. The United States does. And so China's in a lot of trouble because all these countries, or all these companies and countries, I guess, that wanted to work with China because they've been stealing everyone's IP, no one wants to work in China anymore. So right now there's actually a shift going on to Mexico for manufacturing, especially from people in the United States, because the labor is a lot less expensive, and Mexico doesn't steal our intellectual property. So it's a win-win for costs as well as being able to keep your research and development. So this is not something I actually agree with.
Externalizing inflation. So we are causing a devaluation of that debt for all the countries that hold us. Now we're in a moment with rising interest rates that's causing us to need to print, but creating this really weird, difficult moment where as we print, then we have a need to raise interest rates. But the reason we're having to print is because we're raising interest rates, so it's a very difficult moment.
Okay. What he is saying is technically true, but he's leaving out the other half of the story, okay? If our inflation rate is going up, which obviously it's come down fairly significantly from the beginning of this year, you have to realize the rest of the world, because of COVID, everyone print money. Everyone started printing money. There's lockdowns everywhere, so everyone kind of went the same thing that we did. The United States, however, fortunately, our Federal Reserve jumped on inflation sooner than everyone else did. So in all these countries, we had this massive inflation spike. The U.S., I think they were still a little slow. They were probably 6 months slower than they should have been, but they were the first to jump on it. So where our inflation has mostly, not entirely, but a lot of it has gotten cleaned up, and it'll continue to get cleaned up. And obviously, there's still a few hurdles to get over here still. Everywhere else in the world, when their inflation was really high, they just continued to print money and they didn't put a brake on it, where we put a brake on it a lot sooner. So you have to realize this is not a look at the United States. It's a look at the United States in comparison to this other country. Because if you don't have both sides of the story, then it's like, well, hang on a minute, then what's the you're not going to win. Think of this like you're running a race, okay? Let's say we're doing the mile run. If the world's fastest runner is running a mile in 8 minutes, which is ridiculously slow, if the fastest runner in the world can only run a mile in 8 minutes, if you're running an 8-minute and 15-second mile, that's pretty good. But in today's world, where the fastest mile runners are under 4 minutes, 8 minutes, it's only pretty average, because it's compared to what everyone else is doing, not just what you're doing.
But if we could, going back to your idea, it's how we are with each other, if we could get people to come together in the middle, would one of the things we would want to convince the US government to do is to be very cautious about devaluing the dollar? Is that an important idea?
It's more basic than that, and it's more simple, but it's also more difficult. What the reason cycles exist is that the next stage has been determined by what has already happened in the prior stage. So we are in debt a lot.
Okay, to put some background to what he's about to say, Ray Dalio has written a book that basically explains the world through debt cycles. And what he discovered was that there is a consistency to the rise and fall of nations depending upon the stage that they're in. So in this exact moment, it certainly feels like the United States is in a decline. However, it can be very hard to tell when you're in the moment to determine whether or not you're declining or not, because there are natural ups and downs, and we had COVID and a bunch of other stuff is fairly painful, but we don't really know what that long term is until we have fully zoomed out. We just can kind of get glimmers of it. So when you're in it, sometimes it's really difficult to tell what's actually going on.
You can't change that. We got a lot of debt. And if you say, what could you do? I mean, two things come to mind. What you could do is you could be financially strong, and you can not use financial sanctions as a weapon to scare the holders of those bonds. But to be financially strong requires you to not spend more than you earn. That means you either have to cut your spending or raise your earnings. That ain't easy. Okay. So are we going to cut our spending? Okay, now you look at it. What are you going to? Infrastructure programs, I don't know, poverty transfers, defense spending. Okay, what are we going to cut? The world, governments have the same basic economics as people, except for the fact that they can take money from one person and give it to another, and they can print money. That's it. And so when you look at this, you have that gap. You can eliminate the gap by taking money from some and eliminating another and not spending much. Okay, that's not easy, right? Okay, what are you going to... Most governments now don't think, how much money do I have to spend, and then how do I prioritize that? They think, I need to spend on this, I need to spend on that, and I need to spend on that, and they spend on it, and then they either produce a deficit, and then you either have to pay it back with hard money or printed money, and that's the situation. So when you say, what could we do? Well, you've got to get financially strong in a politically fragmented environment in which everybody wants more, and you have to, be a higher percentage of world trade so that everybody wants to use your currency, and be and not threaten the holders of that bonds with freezing their assets.
It is it's a tall order in this moment. It has become so clear to me in the last month since you and I saw each other how important, the reason that you keep coming back to it all comes down to how people treat each other. So in this moment, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but it does feel like the die is cast a little bit. I don't see how we pull ourselves back from the precipice because, to your point about being fiscally responsible, like we'd have to get into a position where we're making more than we spend. I want to circle around to something. As you were talking, you mentioned infrastructure, and it got me thinking about, okay, what are things that we would need to go right? So I think everybody is aware, and I've heard you say that there are changes that are going to need to be made to capitalism in order to bring back a thriving middle class and the importance of the thriving middle class. And you've defined the things, again, staying to the theme of principles here, of the three things that we need to do to be strong as a country, or for any country to be strong. And you said 2 parents in the home, great public education, and then equal opportunity.
This is the Elon Musk story you're not being told. It's centered around what I believe would be the biggest wealth transfer in...
Where do you see us on those? Are we moving in the right direction, moving in the wrong direction?
Well, again, maybe I aspire too much to 2 parents in the home. It's certainly better if you have 2 loving parents raising a family. That's good, but maybe that's too much to ask for. But in other words, good parental guidance. Okay, you're raised well, you're educated well. You can go to a public school that educates you well, and you have good guidance, so you're well raised in a healthy environment. And not only do you learn, skills and all that, but you learn how to behave well with each other. So you learn civility, and so you come out capable and civil to a land of opportunity.
Okay, gonna have to cut it off short because I gotta get to the gym and get some other stuff done. Anyway,